Don't play dumb. I saw you put something inside your jacket.
I didn't steal anything. I just picked up bread.
Cameras don't lie. They're watching you right now.
Then let them watch. I have nothing to hide.
The first thing he noticed was the chill in the air, even inside the store. His hands were empty, his jacket zipped up, and he was just here for one thing: bread. But as soon as he stepped past the automatic doors, he felt the weight of eyes on him. Not just casual glances, but the sharp, measuring kind that made a person shrink a little inside. He tried to ignore it and walked straight to the bread aisle. He knew exactly what he needed: one loaf of the cheapest wheat bread. But every step felt heavier than the last, every aisle somehow narrower, as if the space itself was watching him too. He hadn't even picked up the bread when she appeared. A woman in a red vest with a name tag, standing a few feet away, staring at him as though she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. Her arms were crossed, her face hard, eyes locked on him with a confidence that made him immediately tense. He stopped. She didn't move. And then she spoke. "Put your hands out of your pockets." "Now? What's in the jacket?" He blinked. His hands were already visible, one holding the wallet, the other resting at his side. "Nothing," he said. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "I'm just here for bread. That's it." Her lips tightened. "Yeah, that's what they all say," she replied sharply. Her tone carried the kind of certainty that left no room for argument, no space for explanation. She stepped closer, and with that, the space between them became smaller than it should have been, smaller than a person should have to endure while buying groceries. He felt the tension coiling in his chest. Not fear exactly. He had learned long ago to control that, but a deep, unpleasant awareness that his skin color had already made him guilty in her eyes. He thought about leaving, walking out and forgetting the bread, but he couldn't. He had $20 and some change until his unemployment check hit. He needed that loaf. More than money, he needed to feel some semblance of normal life again, to hold on to dignity in a week that had stripped him of so much. "Check the cameras if you need to," he said quietly, holding up the bread. "I didn't take anything else. I'm telling the truth." Her face didn't change. She reached for the radio on her belt and called someone over. The click and static made him flinch. He didn't move. He couldn't let this escalate in a way that could be used against him. Every experience he'd had with this kind of accusation taught him that anger, protest, even panic would be twisted into proof of guilt. Other shoppers noticed. Phones appeared discreetly, some pointed toward the confrontation. He could hear the low hum of whispered questions, felt the tension vibrating off the walls, but he didn't react. He could feel his hands getting sweaty despite his jacket. He breathed slowly, counting to 4 with each inhale and exhale. The bread stayed firmly in his left hand. Seconds felt like minutes. Then he saw him, the security officer. A young man with short hair and a serious face, moving quickly but without aggression. He approached, tablet in hand. "Sir, can you come with me to review the footage?" "Yes," he said calmly. He followed silently, keeping the loaf visible. Behind him, she walked with the smug certainty of someone who already believed herself right. Every step she took felt deliberate, meant to intimidate, meant to make him flinch. He didn't. He had walked into this store for bread, not a fight. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction of fear. The security room was small and dimly lit, glowing only from monitors that displayed multiple angles of the store. He sat in one of the chairs, eyes forward, waiting. She stood behind the officer, arms still crossed, expecting vindication. He shifted slightly, careful not to make a sound. The footage started. First, the entrance. He walked through at 2:47 p.m., hands briefly in pockets, then pulled out to orient himself. The camera followed him down the aisle. Step by step, his path was clear, simple, and perfectly normal. Next, the bread aisle. He reached for the loaf, checked the price, and turned toward the front. His right hand never moved toward the jacket. Nothing else was taken. The footage was sharp, undeniable. He heard the officer clear his throat. "I don't see anything being concealed," he said. His voice was flat, but precise. Her face changed. Slowly at first, then faster. Confusion, disbelief, panic. Her certainty faltered. I saw." She began, then stopped. There was nothing. No proof, no hidden item, nothing to support the accusation she had shouted across the aisle. He sat back slightly. Relief washed over him, but didn't reach his eyes. He had learned that relief in situations like this could be dangerous. People expected fear or submission, not calm endurance. He remained quiet, letting the evidence speak for him. The officer radioed in the situation. Minutes later, the store manager arrived. A man in his early 50s, with a face that carried both weariness and authority. He watched the footage, and his expression shifted from confusion to anger to exhausted disappointment. He turned to the woman who had accused him. "You racially profiled a customer, accused him without evidence, and doubled down even when shown the cameras," he said calmly but firmly. "You are terminated. You have 10 minutes to clear your locker and leave." She collapsed into silence. He didn't speak. He simply sat there, letting the moment settle. The manager then turned to him, offering an apology and a gift card. He accepted quietly, grateful not for the money, but for the acknowledgement that the truth had finally mattered. Outside, the cold November wind hit his face as he stepped back into the street. He clutched the bread, the small victory tangible but quiet. He thought about all the times the same scenario could have played out with no cameras, no witnesses, no consequences for false assumptions. He thought about young men who weren't able to stay calm, who might have been thrown out, arrested, or worse, simply because of the color of their skin. The cameras had saved him this time. They had spoken the truth. But he knew he was one of the lucky ones. For every viral video, for every piece of evidence captured, there were countless others who suffered in silence, without the proof to clear their name. Now, before we continue, I want to ask you, where are you watching this from? And if you haven't already, please subscribe to stay updated with stories that reveal truth and justice. Your support helps us share more stories like this one. He walked back to his apartment with the bread in one hand and the $500 gift card in the other. The streets were quiet, but every step felt heavier than usual. Not because of the bread or the cold, but because of the memory of her eyes, the way she had stopped him in that aisle as if he were a criminal. It was the kind of look that lingered, even after the cameras proved him innocent. As he reached his building, he noticed a police car parked across the street. 2 officers were standing by the entrance, talking quietly. He paused, heart tightening for just a moment. Nothing had happened yet, and he wasn't carrying anything illegal. But the way they glanced in his direction made him tense. One of the officers, a woman with short hair and a firm expression, walked over. She stopped a few feet away, her hands resting casually on her belt. "Evening," she said. "Do you live here?" "Yes," he replied cautiously. "I just got back." "I need to ask you a few questions," she said. Her tone wasn't aggressive, but there was a weight to it that made him stand still. "We had a report of suspicious activity in the area earlier today." He felt the familiar, sickening twist in his stomach. "Suspicious activity?" he asked quietly, keeping his voice calm. "I was at Target. That's all. I bought bread." The officer nodded slowly, but her eyes didn't relax. "We'll need to hear your side," she said. "Step over here." He complied, carefully. He knew better than to argue. He had seen situations like this spiral out of control in an instant. Even when innocent, the assumptions people made about him could turn any encounter with authority into something dangerous. The second officer, a tall man with a deep voice, stepped forward. "Sir, you're being accused of trying to steal from a store earlier today." We're not saying you did, but we need to confirm. He lifted the bread slightly, just enough for them to see it. I didn't take anything, he said, his voice steady. I bought this. I have a receipt if you need it. The female officer glanced at the loaf, then at him. Do you mind if we see your ID? He handed it over without protest. Every move had to be careful. Every gesture could be misinterpreted. They took his ID and compared it with a report on their tablet. After a few tense minutes, the female officer spoke again. You have no prior record, she said, her voice softer now. It looks like the store made a false accusation. We'll note it in our report, but I need you to remain calm if anyone else approaches about this. I understand, he said, exhaling slowly. Relief washed over him, but it was mixed with exhaustion. His body felt like it had been carrying the weight of the world. As the officers walked back to their car, he thought about how quickly normal life could turn upside down. One wrong assumption, one prejudice, one snap judgment, and a person could be humiliated or worse. He thought about the many times he had been followed in stores, stopped for no reason, assumed guilty. The law could protect him sometimes, but social prejudice could not always be controlled or corrected. He finally got inside his apartment, closing the door carefully behind him. The warmth hit him immediately, but it couldn't erase the tension that still ran through his body. He set the bread on the counter and dropped into his chair. The gift card lay next to him, a small reminder that truth had won today. But the memory of her voice, her accusations, and the confidence with which she had assumed his guilt would linger far longer. He thought about calling someone, anyone, but the exhaustion was too much. Instead, he sat in silence, letting the events replay in his mind. He pictured the security officer, calm and professional, walking him through the footage. He remembered the manager's voice, firm, but just, cutting through the tension like a blade. And he remembered her face, the slow transformation from confidence to disbelief to panic as the footage proved him innocent. The next day, the story had already spread online. A video posted by a bystander at the store had gone viral overnight. He hadn't posted it himself, hadn't even asked for attention. But the internet had a way of amplifying truth. Thousands of comments poured in, most supportive, some incredulous, all watching the footage and condemning the false accusation. A knock at the door startled him. It was the delivery of his new job uniform, a reminder that life was moving forward, even when it felt like the world was constantly ready to doubt him. He opened the package carefully. A new shirt, a new badge, a new beginning. He was grateful, but the gratitude was tempered by the awareness that every step forward had to be measured, calculated, cautious. Later that evening, he sat back on his couch and thought about how different life could have been if the cameras hadn't captured the truth. No one would have believed him. No one would have known the harassment he had endured, the assumptions he had faced, the humiliation. And worse, Clarissa Hill might have kept her job, her prejudice continuing to affect others. He realized that for all the attention the story was receiving, it wasn't just about him. It was about the countless people who didn't have cameras to prove their innocence, who were accused unfairly every day, and whose dignity was stripped away silently, leaving no record. The phone rang. It was the new manager at the warehouse where he'd been hired. "We're excited to have you start," the voice said, cheerful and professional. "We know your first day will be next Monday. Everything's set." He smiled faintly. For the first time in weeks, he felt a measure of stability returning. Not complete, not permanent, but a start. He hung up and sat back, letting the moment sink in. But even as he relaxed, he knew the reality he faced. The world could be unfair, and assumptions about people like him could happen in any store, on any street, in any interaction. Today, he had cameras, witnesses, and the right outcome. Tomorrow? He could only hope. He looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, someone was being accused, watched, followed. He had survived this, but he carried the memory of the confrontation with him, not as anger, but as awareness, and he knew he would never forget how fragile safety and dignity could be, even in the simplest act of buying bread. A message buzzed on his phone. It was from the bystander who recorded the video. "Hey, everyone is sharing your story. Stay safe." He typed a quick reply. "Thank you. I will." He put the phone down. He reached for the bread. The simplicity of it, a single loaf, a small victory in a day full of tension, reminded him that sometimes survival wasn't about grand gestures. It was about holding steady, keeping calm, and letting the truth eventually speak for itself. He ate a slice slowly, thinking about the layers of injustice he'd witnessed firsthand, about the ease with which assumptions could override facts, about the small, critical victories that could feel enormous when stacked against weeks of uncertainty, prejudice, and fear. And somewhere in the back of his mind he knew this was only the beginning of the fight against assumptions. The next confrontation might not be so public, so documented, so undeniably proven by cameras, but he had survived, and for today, that was enough. The morning air was crisp, and the streets smelled faintly of damp leaves and exhaust. He walked to the bus stop, wallet in one hand, backpack slung over his shoulder, careful to keep his head down. Even after the Target incident, the world had not suddenly become safer. Every glance in his direction felt like judgment. Every step carried the invisible weight of suspicion. He had a new warehouse job to start, but he couldn't shake the memory of her eyes, the way she had assumed his guilt before even speaking. It had left him uneasy, hyper-aware of every small action. He adjusted the strap on his backpack and waited for the bus, counting quietly in his head to keep calm. The bus arrived, slowing to a halt with a hiss. He stepped on, showing his pass to the driver. The vehicle was nearly empty, and he chose a seat by the window. As it moved through the streets, he watched people going about their routines, some familiar, some strangers. Every step of life seemed ordinary, except for him. It felt like he was walking with a target on his back. At the warehouse, the foreman greeted him. "Glad to see you, man. We've got a lot to catch you up on." The warehouse was massive, filled with pallets of boxes stacked like miniature skyscrapers, forklifts weaving in between. The air smelled of cardboard and motor oil. For him, this was familiar. The work was hard, but it was honest, and it paid bills. He spent the first few hours learning the new layout, scanning codes, moving boxes, and finding his rhythm. His muscles ached in ways that reminded him of the last job, the last stability he had. But at least here, no one assumed he was a criminal just because of the color of his skin. At least here, he could earn without fear. Then the call came. It was his mother, her voice shaking. "Son, you need to come home. The police are here." His heart stopped. "What? Why? What happened?" "They won't tell me over the phone. Just hurry." He didn't hesitate. He left the warehouse, jumped on the nearest bus, and called his best friend. "Something's wrong. I don't know what, but I need you at the house." When he arrived, the scene was worse than he expected. Two uniformed officers stood on the front porch, their expressions unreadable. A neighbor lingered nearby, whispering. His mother was on the steps, wringing her hands. "What happened?" he asked, stepping forward. "Sir," one officer said, "we had a report of a disturbance in your building. We need to ask you some questions." He sighed. "Disturbance? I just got home from work. There's no disturbance." "Sir, we have reports of a theft in progress. We just need to confirm your side." He froze, the familiar tension returning. "A theft? I didn't. Nothing happened. I've been at work. I just got here." The officers exchanged a glance. Then the male officer spoke directly. "Sir, we need to come inside and make sure everything is secure." He felt the tight knot in his stomach tighten further. "You can't just come in. There's nothing wrong. I've done nothing." The female officer stepped closer, her tone firm, but measured. "We're not saying you did anything wrong. We're just following up on a report. Please cooperate. It will be easier if you do." He looked at his mother, whose eyes pleaded silently. He knew arguing now would only make things worse. He moved aside, letting the officers inside. Every step felt heavier, every heartbeat loud. Once inside, the officers asked him to sit. The female officer pulled out a small notebook. "Sir, we need you to tell us about your movements today. Start from the morning." He recounted the day, the bus, the walk, the new warehouse, the Target incident. Every word was precise, careful, measured. He didn't want to give them an excuse to misinterpret anything. Then the male officer spoke. "We need to check the footage from your building cameras. Just routine." Routine. That word echoed in his mind. He knew all too well how routine could be twisted into harassment. He agreed, staying calm, controlling his breathing. The officers moved to the monitor, pulling up footage. It was quick, clear, every movement documented, every step accounted for. Nothing unusual. Nothing to justify suspicion. The female officer looked at him. "It seems everything checks out. No disturbance. You're free to go." He nodded slowly, relief flooding him, but it was cautious. The world had not suddenly become safe, had not suddenly stopped assuming things about him. Today, it was footage. Tomorrow, it might be assumptions, prejudices, someone's unfounded fear. His mother hugged him tightly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have called. I worry." "I know," he said, letting himself relax for a moment. "But you can't always control what happens outside these walls." He left, walking back to the streets with the sunlight warming his back. He thought about the Target incident, the viral video, the gift card. He thought about the moments when the cameras had told the truth and vindicated him. He thought about the countless times when there were no cameras, no witnesses, no one to speak up. And then the call came from a number he didn't recognize. "Hello," he answered cautiously. "Is this?" a woman asked. Her voice was nervous, almost trembling. "You don't know me, but I saw what happened at Target. The video, I posted it." He swallowed. "Yes. I wanted to know if you're okay. People are talking about it. They're angry at what happened to you. I just wanted to see if you're all right." He paused, processing. "I'm okay. I'm tired, but okay. Thank you." "You're welcome," she said softly. I wanted you to know. Not everyone ignores it." He hung up, leaning against the brick wall. For a moment, he let himself breathe. He was tired, yes, but also alive. And in a world that often assumed the worst about him, today he had proof that truth could win. But he also knew the truth was fragile. Prejudice didn't disappear because of a video, or a gift card, or a single manager being fired. It was embedded in how people saw him, how society treated him, how the world assumed his guilt without evidence. He thought about the future, about each new day, each new store, each new interaction. Every simple act, buying bread, walking down the street, entering a building, could be scrutinized, judged, assumed guilty. And yet, he had survived. He had remained calm. He had maintained dignity. He had relied on truth, and truth had been undeniable. He took out the $500 gift card. It felt heavier now, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. Proof, validation, justice, however small. He walked into a small grocery store to pick up essentials. He moved slowly, deliberately, aware of the stares, aware of the potential assumptions. And when he paid for the items, card and cash, without incident, he felt a quiet triumph. Not because the world had changed, but because he had navigated it successfully, safely. Back at home, he sat at his kitchen table, looking at the bread. Simple. Ordinary, but now loaded with meaning. A loaf of bread had become a symbol of what he had endured, what he had survived, and the injustice that could so easily have gone unchallenged. And he realized something vital. Survival wasn't about rage or confrontation or demanding justice at every step. Sometimes it was about control, composure, patience, and letting the evidence speak. Sometimes it was about being the one who stayed calm while the world assumed your guilt. That evening, he texted the bystander who had recorded the video. "Thank you for recording. I didn't ask for it, but it made a difference." A reply came quickly. "Everyone deserves a fair shot. Don't let them make you feel otherwise." He nodded quietly to himself. He would carry that thought forward. Tomorrow, he would start his new job. Tomorrow, he would continue walking through the streets, holding his head high, buying his bread, living his life. And he would remember. Always remember. Because the world might never stop assuming the worst, but he had survived today. And that truth, simple, undeniable, was his armor. The next morning, he woke to an uneasy quiet. The city outside hummed as usual, but he felt the weight of the previous weeks pressing down. He had bread in the cupboard, food in the fridge, a gift card in his wallet, and a new job ahead. But the Target incident lingered, sharp and raw. Every memory of that aisle, her accusations, the judgmental stares, was vivid in his mind. He had promised himself he wouldn't let it consume him. Yet, he also knew the world didn't reset after a single act of justice. He dressed carefully, pulling on a simple jacket, not for warmth, but for control of how he presented himself, how he was perceived. Today, he would run errands, pay bills, pick up groceries, take care of what life demanded. He stepped out, gloves on, mask in place, head down. But even with careful composure, he noticed it. Glances in stores, people stepping aside, eyes following him. He'd become hyper-aware of the world, a side effect of being accused for no reason other than his skin. At the bus stop, a man muttered under his breath. He ignored it. The past weeks had taught him. Responding in anger only gave them more ammunition. He looked away, breathing slow, focused on the day ahead. At a nearby convenience store, the clerk greeted him without judgment. He bought milk, eggs, and some fruit, items to supplement his groceries. His hands shook slightly as he counted cash and swiped the gift card. Every transaction reminded him of the fragility of his daily life, the ease with which he could be assumed guilty, the importance of maintaining control. Then his phone buzzed. A new notification. Someone had messaged him on social media. He hesitated, then opened it. The message was from a reporter. "We're following up on the viral Target video. Are you willing to speak?" He read it twice. His heart raced. He hadn't sought attention. He hadn't wanted to be a symbol. But he realized now that speaking out might help others who were wrongly accused, others who had no camera footage to defend themselves. He typed slowly, "Yes, I will speak, but only about the truth. Nothing more." Within an hour, he received a call. A reporter introduced herself, warm but professional. She asked him to recount what happened. He spoke slowly, carefully, recounting the day. The bread, the store, the manager, the cameras. No embellishments, just facts, just the truth. "I didn't ask to be filmed," he said, "but I'm glad someone did. I want people to see what can happen if someone assumes guilt based on appearance alone. It's not just humiliating, it's dangerous." The reporter listened quietly, typing notes. "And you're okay now?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm okay, but I want everyone to know. Not everyone is lucky enough to have cameras. Not everyone stays calm. The world assumes the worst, and that can ruin lives." After the interview, he walked back home. The streets seemed different now. They were the same streets, but he moved through them with a new awareness, a sharper understanding of how the world viewed him. Back at his apartment, he opened his mail. Among the letters was an envelope from Target Corporate. Inside, A note apologized again for the incident and included a formal statement affirming that the manager responsible had been terminated. There was also a small check to reimburse him for the day's missed work. The gesture was minor, but the acknowledgement mattered. Recognition of wrongdoing was rare, and he accepted it quietly. Later that week, he visited the small park near his building. Children played, joggers passed by, and the city moved in its usual rhythm. He sat on a bench, thinking. He reflected on the humiliation, the anger, the fear, but also on the moments of calm, the people who helped him, and the undeniable evidence that had vindicated him. Then a police officer approached, not the ones from before, but a local beat officer. She nodded politely. "You're Amir, right?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Yes. I just wanted to say I saw the video. What happened to you? It's unacceptable. I want you to know the department takes these things seriously, even outside formal investigations. You handled yourself with remarkable composure." He blinked, surprised by her directness. "Thank you. That means a lot." She smiled faintly. "Keep standing up for yourself. The world needs people like you who insist on truth." He watched her walk away, realizing that acknowledgement, small as it was, could shift perspectives. It wouldn't erase the prejudice, but it mattered. At home, he checked social media. The target video had surpassed 3 million views. Comments poured in. Outrage, support, calls for systemic change. He read some, careful not to let the negativity take root. Some were from young men who had experienced similar accusations, who thanked him for sharing his story. Others were from parents, educators, people who had never considered how ordinary actions could be misinterpreted. And then he noticed a direct message from the woman who had first recorded the video. "You okay? Everyone's talking about this. Don't let them break you." He typed back, "I'm okay. I will not be broken. Thank you." The weeks that followed were quiet, but meaningful. He started his new warehouse job full-time, earning steadily, regaining a sense of stability. He no longer worried constantly about small errands. The gift card and careful budgeting had helped him regain breathing room. But he remained vigilant, aware that prejudice didn't disappear overnight. One evening, he walked past the Target store. He paused outside, looking at the familiar automatic doors. Memories of the confrontation surfaced. Her crossed arms, the accusations, the stares of other shoppers. He smiled faintly, not out of humor, but relief. The cameras had captured the truth. Justice had been served, not in the streets, not in public opinion, but in undeniable evidence. He thought about the manager, now fired, facing consequences for her actions. He thought about the system, flawed as it was, which had occasionally allowed truth to prevail. And he thought about himself, calm, dignified, and validated by fact rather than assumption. That night, he made a simple dinner. Bread, eggs, peanut butter. He ate quietly, savoring each bite. He reflected on the fragility and resilience of life. How easily someone could be assumed guilty. How necessary composure and patience were. And how powerful evidence, even in the form of a simple video, could be in delivering justice. He leaned back, letting the day's fatigue wash over him. He thought about every man and woman who had been wrongly accused, who had no cameras, no witnesses, no advocates. He thought about the small victories that often went unnoticed. And he realized, today, he had won. Not because he was perfect, not because the world had changed, but because the truth had prevailed, and he had survived it with integrity intact. As he looked out the window at the city lights, he felt a quiet sense of hope. The cameras didn't lie. The evidence didn't lie. And in a world that often assumed the worst, sometimes, just sometimes, truth could not be denied. And for Amir, that truth wasn't abstract. It was tangible. It was bread in his hand, justice in his favor, and dignity restored. Proof that even in a world that was often unfair, standing firm in reality could protect him. Because the cameras didn't lie, and neither had he.